Hello and welcome back to the channel where we are building a video game from scratch using Love2d and Lua. Yesterday we worked on our particle system for our scene. Now, here's the test, right? We can go into a scene and spawn our sand particles. This isn't the right spot, but this is us testing it. Right, so here is what we're calling light sand, and then if we transition to a scene with heavy sand, it gets more advanced, and as we come with one off, it turns off. So this is great. This is almost what we need. I say almost because if we do a warp zone and then try to do it, we crash. So the begin shifting dispatch is crashing because I think the map row map column params aren't being set, but let's just see if we do another type of warp zone, because maybe we'll go to the refinery and we'll try to see if it crashes here too. Yes. Okay. So yes, the begin shifting dispatch is messed up. So let's see if we could find that. Now there's a lot going on here, so it's probably going to be tricky to track down, but we'll try. So let's look at what happens on a begin shifting, because that's where it's crashing. So we define our begin shifting here. Now where it's crashing is having to do with the weather here. So, oh, I see the issue. Yeah, I think the issue here. So what's happening is we go in our map declarations and we insert into a .weather table into our scene what type of weather, if any, there is. So we're saying, okay, map 8.2 gets light sand, map 7.2 gets heavy sand. So that's how we're defining what's in there. So then we're saying, well, if there is a weather thing in there, we're going to insert a particle system. Now, the sand system, you know, this we're not checking if it's a sand system. Yeah, so we'd probably want to put something like this here. We'd want to insert the sand system if it's either heavy or light sand, because we're also going to have rain or snow as other particle systems, which we have, just not part of our weather just yet. So if we keep walking along here, what we're doing is, if our thing's not nil, meaning it's one of those maps with a weather like light or heavy sand, we put in there. If it's light sand, we go ahead and insert a sand system, and then we set the emission rate to be the light emission rate if it's light, and if it's heavy, we set the emission rate to be the heavy emission rate here. So this else is catching if there is something. Yeah, what is this? If the thing in the first index of weather does not equal nil, then we're checking if it's equal to sand. So this else is catching if it is equal to nil, meaning if we don't pass a weather, if by the time we're transitioning into a scene with no weather being instantiated in the map declarations, we're going to go ahead and set the emission rate to the current particle system to be 0 so that it stops emitting. So where are we crashing? Because once we do a warp zone, then once we trigger scene transition, it just doesn't work. So what does a warp zone have to do with the weather system here? I don't know. And it's crashing in the begin shifting transition. $146. Okay. Okay, so I guess it comes down to this map row, map call. So where are we setting this map row? Because the idea is we're trying... Well, let me see. I don't think we're removing a particle system here anywhere. We might have to cleanse... I think we might... Oh, shoot, man. I think we might have to flush our table for our particle system, because when we do this table.insert, we're kind of just putting more than one particle system into the particle system. But that gives us more than one particle system in the scene, which shouldn't be possible. So let's just see where we're doing this particle system update. If there is a value in the first index, then we're only updating the first index, and then we're only rendering the first index. But that doesn't fix the issue that we can put more than one particle system in the scene, because if we go into the play state here and we decide to print on screen a value like, we're in the play state, we're going to print out the value that's in our global scene, and we're going into the particle system, and it's called particle system. Is it with an S? Holy crap. Hey, thank you for the follow, Cernuska. I appreciate it. I got my alerts way too loud, so that always freaks me out. Welcome in. It is a particle system without an S here. So what we're looking for is we're looking for the scene, and what we want to do is print up like the number of particle systems that we've got. So I'm going to concatenate a value that we're going to convert into a string. And the string is not the particle system from our scene, but the number of values that are in that table. So we do that number. Then we can give us an X and a Y for the debug. So we should be able to see if we are in fact putting in more than one. So look right here, we've got one particle system in the scene, and then we should have two here. Yes, and then if we go back, see how we're never turning them out, and we never flush them. So part of me is thinking that the warp zone is screwing up for something due to this. But see how it gets reset here? It does get reset, and then we just crash. So it does get flushed out. The particle systems gets flushed out for some reason. I'm not sure why that would happen. Okay, so let's print up the map row and map column and see. So we'll say we're going to print up the row and print up the column. And we're going to put the scene views map row and map call. Okay. Now I think this is the value that's okay. Map row, yeah, not number. Okay. 9282 728292. Okay, so when we come back out of the warp zone, we should have this 92. We do. Okay, so it's not the map row map call. I thought that was it. So what is messing up then? Because we're crashing at this line 146, which is a nil value in our P system for our particle system in our global scene. But I think our scene is kind of instantiated in the play state. I guess I'm not sure why our particle system, our weather particle system, is getting flushed when we do a warp zone. Because right here, we just keep adding a particle system into that scene's particle system. Unless we warp zone, then it gets flushed to 0 for some reason. Oh, it doesn't even matter if we scene transition into... Okay, so this is something, right? So like now, if we don't even start the particle system period, can we even just scene transition anywhere? We cannot. Okay, so this is something to do with it. So where did we go wrong here? You know, if we take out the weather particle system release, let's see if we get stuck. We don't. Oh, yes, we do at the end of the scene transition. That is so weird. What line did it crash on there? Because I would not have guessed that was the issue. Scene 155. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying if there is no weather in the scene that we are transitioning into by the time we're done shifting scenes, then we're going to flush the particle system of the one that was active. But this is assuming that there is an active particle system, which there isn't always. So if we turn that off, we should fix our crash, and then we can kind of, yeah. Okay, so we shouldn't have our particles back when we walk up here, but we're not crashing. Okay, so we basically want to with this turned on, we crash here at line 147, right? Because we've got particles. We're inserting a secondary heavier particles here. We never delete them, but we're only ever updating and rendering the frontmost particle system in that table. So it makes sense that it wouldn't crash here, but if we try to scene transition after we've done that, we crash. And it crashes at 147 because it's indexing a nil value, and that is just right here. So I guess we want to only do this if it's not nil. So like we can say, well, and we're kind of doing that here. Okay, so this is checking if we have a weather in the weather that of the scene that we're transitioning into. So if we have a particle system in the scene we're transitioning into, we're going to do this. Otherwise, if there's no particle system, then we want to just set that emission rate to 0 for the active particle system. But we're crashing here because there is no particle system in that table, even though... See, that's what I don't get. I mean, okay, so if we take out the finish shifting, it's not crashing on the finish shifting, it's crashing on the begin shifting, right? So transitioning here. Okay, so that's fine, but it's that. Once we do a warp zone and come back, we can't do that anymore. What the heck? Crashes at 148 right here. So it's telling me this else can only execute if there is no weather particle system. So there was no weather particle system. So let me try walking into the refinery and triggering the particle system, because that would mean it is not nil. Then it would go and insert a new one. So let's see if it crashes there. Does it crash on any scene transition or just the ones that don't have a particle system in it? Huh. Yeah, so why would it crash? Why would it crash at 148 if the value in weather, you know, we've printed up that the map row and map call is right. So we must be accidentally clearing the weather table somewhere, which we didn't add anything to do that. Because yeah, why does it get set to 0 there? Where do we set the dot weather anywhere in the scene on a finish shifting? We don't. So why does it get set to 0? We flush it here. No. We initialize it. Okay, so we initialize it to 0. Then we insert 2 weather strings. Okay, then on a finish shifting, and we've commented that out, so that's not the issue, and these are the 4. Okay, so what's going on? It's not the weather, it's the particle systems in our global particle systems. Okay, so let's print up not weather, but particle system in our scene and see what that is coming out to be. So we'll not our weather, but we want our particle system in our scene. Oh, it is. So why does this get set to 0? Because we're never clearing it. It just, for some reason, gets cleared on a warp zone. Let's try a dungeon warp and see if it does it there too. Pretty sure it would just go to 0. Yes. Okay, so why is it doing that? We've got to be doing something to the dot particle system upon a finish shifting. We have to be doing something like that. See, we turned that off. Okay, if we turn off this bit, do we stop crashing at least? So we shouldn't be able to turn off the sand, but I'm hoping it stops it from crashing after a warp zone. It does. Okay. Okay. So it is in the it is here. Okay, so when do we set the emission rate to 0? We want to set the emission rate to 0 if we begin shifting into a scene without any particle system inside it. Now, a warp zone doesn't count as a begin shifting. So something's getting lost in translation there with when we warp zone, what could be happening there? I guess I just still don't get why our particle system is getting cleansed here. Our particle system is getting flushed, and I don't know why upon a warp. So we'll go back to our warping logic and see, because here this first debug is the number of particle systems. So every time we scene transition into one, we get a new one in there, but we're only updating and rendering the first one. But then it gets set to 0 here, so it has to be somewhere in the begin warp zone. Yo, Cavictus, what's up? Yo, we're doing okay. I thought this would be easier to fix than it is, but that's just how it goes. We have to be doing something to the particle system here in the warp zone. I don't see it. Did we do anything to the particle system or the weather table in our scene here? Yo, sounds good, Cavictus. Thanks for hanging. Okay, I think... You know, I thought we added something here last commit. It might be this. It might be this in the scene. We're flushing our particle system table upon a scene init, and when we warp zone, we reinitialize the scene instead of just updating the current scene to be the next map. So I think it's this line right here. Yeah, we don't want to initialize. We want to initially, gosh dang. Yeah, I think we want to take that out. Find a different way of doing that. That's the only way, that's the only place we're flushing that table. So can we put it outside the init? I don't think we can. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I guess that makes sense because it's not that this is making it wrong. It's that this is the only thing we've seen that is different about a warp zone and coming out. But if you think about it, the line that's messing up is 148 in our scene, which even if we don't do a particle system, we crash right here on scene 147. Okay, so it just doesn't have a particle system here. So we can say, don't do this if we don't have a particle system in here. So we can say if our particle system at index 1 is equal to nil, not equal to nil, then we want to go ahead and reset its emission. If there is no particle system there, we don't want to set the emission because there's no emission to set because there's no particle system inside. So maybe that'll work. Okay, we don't crash. So let's see if it works outside a warp zone. Oh my god. That's it. That's it. Now we're still not clearing the particle systems. You know, we still have like a number of 4 particle systems in there. So before we insert it, we should probably delete what used to be in there so that there's only ever 1 particle system in there, because we don't necessarily need that clogging up our game's memory. But it's working out of a warp zone, which is very nice. Very cool. Okay, this is good. So I guess before we insert a particle system, we kind of need to erase the old one, right? So like right here, when we insert a particle system, if we cleanse the we basically flush the table to be empty, then insert the only one. Does that work? We should only ever have 1 in that number column here. Okay, it looks like it works. Let's try the refinery. Okay. That should be heavy sand, yeah? Oh, the heavy sand's on this scene. Okay, so we have it on a scene transition, right? So like if we come out of the warp zone into a field with a weather particle system, it's not spawning because it's only setting the emission rate on a begin shifting, which doesn't happen on a warp zone. So we need to do the equivalent of initializing that emission rate at a warp zone transition, just like our begin shifting has, because this scene has heavy sand. It has heavy sand right there, but it just doesn't go if we come out of a warp zone into a scene with a weather particle system. So we just need to mimic the begin shifting particle system here. Oh, and why is our refinery state is always rendering our Flama, which is not right. So that's another just little thing. Yeah, that's so jacked up. Okay, so we just have to adjust our HUD logic in our refinery state to be the same as our play state, and then that should work. So let's try to do... This is on a begin shifting, right? Where we're initializing this with an emission rate of said things. So if, you know, we just kind of need to do the same thing on a warp zone, on a successful warp zone initialization, or a warp zone. This V collides and not warping is it. So we could try to do it here. And it's not that... Actually, yeah, this is in our scene. So this, I want to say that this should work. Okay, light sand, heavy sand, refinery state, and see, we're not getting that heavy sand initialization here. And that's because do we not have the right map row, map call here? It might be too soon in the warp zone logic. Because if we try to do that before we have our... Oh, it's warp row. Warp row, warp call. Let's try that. Light sand, heavy sand. Shoot. It's a v.warp row because it's a v from right here when we snag the object of the warp. I don't even know where we're doing this. Where do we snag that v? It's the v right here. Okay, so this needs to be v. Okay. V dot warp row, V dot warp column. $435 still crash. See, look at this. We assign V into this warp object. So let's try to do this after we snag the warp object. Well, the V is the warp object, so we shouldn't have any... That shouldn't change anything. Okay, so how come we can use... Oh, this V? The warp row... Oh my gosh. So the warp row is the V, the actual object that's in our collidable map object. This is not right. Where does this freaking... warp row and column get defined? See, through the warp zone. Dude, no, yeah, that should work. Yeah, if our player collides with a warp zone and we're not already warping, then I'm saying, okay, well now go into the warp zone's warp row, which is the row of the global map that we're transitioning into via warp, and check if that thing has a string in its weather table. If it does, insert the right particle system based on the option of light or heavy. But we're still crashing on this warp row for some reason. Oh my gosh. Now we're crashing here, saying it's a nil value, which let's just try to hard code in the warp row warp call to see if we can just not crash on this 435 line. So the warp row, what I'm thinking is the warp row is going to be this 7-2 by the time we come back to it. Oh, but it's crashing on a warp 2, not warp from. Okay, so let me... Let's look at our warp zone class. See, we have a warp row and a warp call, and those are the parameters that we pass into the warp zone when we initialize it. Yeah. You can think of the warp zone as that green box that once we collide with, it knows to warp us to the other scene. Now it's saying this is nil, even though when we go to warp, I guess does our weather table... Yeah, okay. So let's just try... If we take this out, we should stop crashing at the very least. I didn't save it. Okay. So this is going to be... Yo, what's up, Magnetonics? This is going to be... I think this is row 1, column 11. Yo, I've been doing good, dude. You know, it's always a little slower than I think it's going to be progress-wise, you know? So the demo still isn't ready, but we're working on it. So yeah, we're just trying to get the particle system, kind of like the weather particles, working based on the map. So that's what we're trying to debug. It's like it's almost done. It's just that it breaks upon a warp, which is any non-adjacent scene transition. And it's very, you know, it's very light mistake. But it just is, it's, you know, a little frustrating that it's not working like it's supposed to. Because I think once we come out of the first dungeon, we're gonna be somewhat in the desert. It's probably gonna have the light sand particle system the very first scene we come out of the dungeon. So we do need to figure this out upon a warp zone initialization with a scene with weather in it. Ooh, but yeah, it's not going so hot. So yeah, the issue is this scene has light sand, this scene has heavy sand, and they get initialized properly when we do a scene transition into them. They just don't get initialized right if we go from a warp zone. So see, there's no sand here, even though that thing has a heavy sand on that scene. So just have to figure that out. So here, you know, we're in our scene, we're cycling through our warp zones if there are any. And if we collide with a warp zone in our current map and we're not already warping, we need to do... No, it's not a timing thing. It's an emission rate thing. So like the particle system needs this emission rate to know how many particles to spawn. And we're doing that at the end of a scene transition which is working. Like this, going from one map to another is working. It's setting that proper emission rate, but it's not setting that emission rate coming from a warp zone. Because like this, if you look at the map, is actually teleporting us from... It teleports us from walking in this building to way over here, which is why I call it warp, because the refinery is way up here. So it's at a non-adjacent displacement. And it's coming from a warp zone into a scene is just not setting the emission rate for the weather particle system that's in that scene. Now it's still in that scene because if we do a scene transition, it's still there. Like it's still there. It just doesn't get initialized right after the warp. Is the warp code further down than the adjacent code? I think it is. It's at line 440 versus a begin shifting. Yeah, begin shifting is like line 60 and the warp zone code is down at 440. But nothing, the begin shifting doesn't trigger on a warp zone. That's something totally different. So I don't think the order would matter here. Like I thought it'd be as simple as just doing the same checks. You know, like we could put we don't have, I think it's 111 is the refinery scene. So I want to just see if we can put a hard-coded 111 here and see if that fixes it. Just to prove something, not as a solution, but just to debug. So the row is 1 here. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and you know what? You might have just reminded me of something. Oh my gosh. You did just remind me of something. So what happens... Yeah, what happens on a warp is we reinitialize the scene, which might be flushing the particle system. Because we could be inserting it here. We could be inserting it here, but then a little... Oh, dude, I mean, I think you might be onto something. It's just that the warp zone... We kind of reinitialize the scene, don't we? Let's see, when we initialize a scene... We do it here on a scene, only in the play state. Oh my gosh, yeah, we do. We do it right here. Okay, dude, you're right, because it's... With the initialization, the order gets reset right here. When we do this scene, we reinitialize it, which flushes the particle system that's in the scene, because we initialize with an empty scene. So since the particle system logic was inserted here, then it gets flushed upon reinitialization. So if we reinitialize the scene, then we still need access to the warp row. But we have... Oh, it's going to be nasty. It's going to be nasty. Because the value we need as the warp row is this whole thing here. So we can say that we want to paste... Nope. Oh man. Dude, that might be it. That I think that let's see if that fixes it. So we'll do v.warp row and then go scene view, current map, warp zone table, index k dot warp row. That's the first value. And then the v.warp column needs to be changed into this. That's why I said it'd be nasty, because it's just like a whole bunch of crap. Let's see. Okay, light sand, heavy sand, warp zone. We don't crash. Come back. Still not there. Fuck. So we're not setting the emission rate. That was almost it. I was pretty sold that was it. But maybe we're doing the wrong warp row? No, because when we trigger a scene transition for a warp, after we initialize it, that'll flush our table. Okay, so let me just comment this out, and we'll see if we have any particle system in our table once we come back from a warp zone. Okay, so we're printing up the number of particle systems. I think it is 0 here. Okay, so look, there's one particle system. We replace it, so there's still one particle system. There's 0. Now, do we have 1 here? Yeah, we don't. Yeah. So it is right there. Upon the reinit of the scene, we're flushing that particle system. So we either need to... It's almost like we need to not initialize it empty because we reinitialize the scene. Actually, hold on, because particle system. Yeah, okay, so particle system is pulled from our weather table on our map. And that is global, and that remains untouched. It's just that the particle system, which is actually updating and rendering, is getting flushed upon a scene reinitialization. So there's got to be... You know, I want to say that we can... Let me see. So the scene view... You know what? This... The warp row and warp column that we're passing in here to our scene initialization is from the current map's warp zones index K warp row. So if there's more than one warp zone, okay, so maybe I think the order... Let's just try to do this after we do all this junk. After we do all this junk, it's like where we used to have it, which is in a block just like this. So it's like we need... For right now, I'm just going to yank this. We're going to kind of... You know, after we reinitialize it And after we do this... Crap. Dude, I have no idea. Let me just... try. So we're going to reinitialize it right here. And if we're starting a scene transition, we're going to do this stuff. I guess I don't like the idea of inserting more than one particle system and clearing it every frame during a warp transition. But if and okay, so we don't want this anymore. We want the v dot warp row, I think. Hey Loki, what's up? How's it going? Okay, light sand, heavy sand, none, shit. Dude. It's the freaking init that's screwing us. Because ideally we don't flush. Because when we reinitialize our scene view, we're like right here. Yeah, when we reinitialize the scene view, we're just flushing the particle system that used to be in that scene, which we don't want to do. So let's just figure out how to not flush that upon a init so that we just don't have to worry about this crap. Okay, so how would we do this? The only thing I could think of is to... Because if we look at our scene right here, it's right here. This particle system gets empty table is what's screwing it up when we reinitialize it. So we could... Now it needs a table. It needs a table, just not in the init. So it's like maybe when we make the scene, once it's made, we can just create a table explicitly and flush it there in the play state init instead of the scene init, because we're never initializing a play state again. We're just going back to updating the play state. So that's an option, I guess. Or we can have we could have an option in our scene that is like, you know, we could say like if if P system is nil, then we want to initialize it as an empty one. But if we say that there's a P system, you know, if we pass in a parameter here as the particle system, then it doesn't flush this thing. So like if we say particle system is in the warp, when we do a scene reinitialization, a scene view reinitialization, right here, we can say as that fifth parameter, we can say, okay, well now there's a P system, which means it wouldn't be treated as nil, therefore it wouldn't flush the particle system that's in that scene. So let's see if we have one particle system in that table, and it should flush here. Oh gosh. That's not it, man. Yo, sounds good, Magnetonics. Thank you for stopping in. Appreciate you. Yo, your advice got me to find the problem. We're still working on fixing it, but thanks for the help, dude. Yep. Okay, so what's happening here is on a scene transition, on a begin shifting, we look into the scene that is about to come into frame, and we look in its weather table and see what it is, and that's how we know what particle system to insert into the P system on our scene. And that's why it says 1 right there. This should be 0. There should be no particle system active because we went to a scene without one in it. So that's at very least, I don't think that's not causing the problem, but that's just one thing that's wrong. Because then we come in here, we delete the old particle system, we put in the new one that's in the weather table for this current map. But see how it's 1 here. It gets flushed to 0, and it should be populated right here upon a warp zone. But yeah, it's getting flushed because of the scene reinitialization. Yeah, because we're overriding the particle system that used to be in there with okay, so maybe the move is once we're warping right before we initialize this new scene, yeah, it's almost like we need to go into the current scene view and pull out the particle system as a local. You know, we can say local weather is going to be the scene view dot particle system, and it's not as easy as copying the whole table, is it? Because the particle system is coming from particle system is a table that holds each thing, so we want to pull, if we're warping and the particle system isn't nil, we want to pull the value that's in the first spot there. So like if the scene views particle system at index 1 doesn't equal nil, then we're going to go ahead and snag the weather here so that we can initialize scene view. That'll delete the particle system, but then we want to go into the scene view's p-system table, which was overwritten to be empty, and then table.insert into that particle system table, and it's not p-system, it is particle system. Into that particle system, we want to insert the old weather particle system that we pulled right before we reinitialized it. It's just that this is local. Should we have access to this? Because it's nested? Yeah. We need to define it out here. Can we just say local weather? Then reassign it, and then we have access to it to insert it into the particle system. Let's see. Okay. Okay. It kind of worked. It kind of worked. Yeah, it just didn't flush upon a warp zone, which we would need to do. I'm kind of confused how it brought over the particle system. I guess we are updating the scene still. Okay, so upon a warp, we just need to flush this particle system from our scene so that we don't accidentally do this stuff. So when we do a warp up here, we say, okay, we collide with a warp zone object and we are not already warping, then let's go ahead and go into our scene view and, shoot, because if we flush it here, we won't be able to reinitialize it from... Okay, this might be okay. I still think this will be wrong, but if we do this, let's fix one thing at a time, and its particle system is going to be flushed out. Okay, so we're going to flush it. So now it should go away once we go into the refinery, but it will still be gone by the time we come out. Oh, it disappeared right away, which it wasn't very pretty. So we would want to do it not here, upon a not upon a collision with the warp zone, but upon a trigger finishing transition right before we finish it. You know, we finish warping, then we want to clear that particle system. Let's see. Because we would need the corresponding particle system. That wasn't it either. It's like right when we do, you know, we have a fade, which is a, what do we call it? We call it fade transition. Let's try it right here. This at least fixed our initialization problem, but we still need to, there we go. Now we still need to put it back on a warp, just like we are when we're doing a begin shifting. I would not have figured this out last night. Last night I was thinking, I was like, I should have just toughed it out and finished it, but it's like, it's already been over an hour and we're still not done with it. I don't even know if what I'm doing is gonna be the solution. So okay, so what happens is we basically need to overwrite if the scene we're warping into has a weather particle system, then we need to pull it into the scene view. But here we're flushing the particle system once we're done warping. So after that, after that, after we flush it, then we need to check, okay, well, if there is a weather particle, once we've flushed it, then we need to check the row that we're warping into and see if there is a new one that needs to be inserted into the weather table. Oh, Lord. Let's try it. Let's try it. Shit. Still not it, dude. It's not the self particle system. Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Fuck. Self is the scene. Scene view is the scene. This is messy. Let's see. Okay, maybe not. Changing the self there. Okay, so this is almost it. It's almost like we can't use the scene in the refinery state or in the indoors. But that's how we're getting all the same behavior from our player class and everything. Because that's right. Like that is the right particle system for this scene coming out of the warp zone. But what's not right is the freaking this. So when we have this as scene view, once we're done with the warp, we flush it. But it's not that, warping to the refinery, when we're done warping, we should not necessarily cleanse the particle system, but pull the particle system that we need. So instead of doing it like this, instead of deleting it, what we can do is say, well, let's go. I don't know if it's the map row at this point in time. Let's just try this, because what we're trying to do is set the emission rate to 0 if we're going into a scene without a particle system. So let's see if that might do it. Because going into a warp zone, we don't define a weather table for the refinery. So we should be setting the emission rate here. So this is telling me that we probably did something wrong with the map row, map column stuff. Yeah, it's not map row, it should be warp row, but it's not this. Not this crap. I don't think it's here. Okay, so what happens is we collide with the warp zone, then we start to trigger this scene transition. if we're starting the scene transition, we close the curtains, essentially, for that transition. Then, if our transition X is greater than 0, meaning we've reached the end of the closed curtains, then we're going to start the scene transition finished, which is just weird. So we did have it here. So it's like once the curtains are closed, we reinitialize the scene to be the new warp row warp call. So at this point, once we initialize the scene, we flush that particle system with the init. So that is breaking the init, but we also snag the weather right here, and we insert the weather into the scene view's particle system. So it's pulling the weather from the old active weather in the scene view, which makes sense that it's showing up in the refinery. So like we only want to insert this if there is this isn't quite right. So it's like, yeah, we finish the warp zone. I guess this is like, yeah, this is in the finish warp zone. We reinitialize the scene. Then we're going to go and reinsert the particle system from our weather. Now, when we do this, weather is the old active particle system from our scene, which, if we're going inside, doesn't make sense to carry over. But I guess it comes down to, if we go inside, I don't want a particle system in our scene at all, right? Unless it's like a special dungeon with its own particle system. So we don't want to always copy the weather into the scene's particle system. We only want to do that if help if you would not disable weather after warp, just set particles to 0. That could work. That could work. Because the thing I'm hesitant to do that about is like if we go from a scene, like I would like if our particle system doesn't carry over old logic, because I feel like if we walk through the desert, then sand is in our particle system, then we walk inside and sand is still in our particle system, but we have that emission rate to 0. Once we set the particles to 0, the emission rate, it still allows the particles to live out their life cycle, but it stops spawning new ones. So we would catch the end of the sand as we walk into a warp. Or gosh, I don't know. Because yeah, we could, instead of, well, I guess, and the other issue is that it crashes because there is no particle system, so we kind of have to, oh gosh, yeah, what is happening? Because like if we don't insert anything into this particle system, we shouldn't crash, because particle systems should be allowed to have nothing, because a lot of the scenes don't have a particle system in the weather table. So let's just see. Yeah, see, that's right. It just doesn't get reinitialized here at the exit. So that's fine. Doing a warp and reinitializing the scene is fine for a particle system, as long as what we're going into doesn't have a weather particle system. But once we're done with the warp, we don't have a way to insert... See, dude, I don't get why this is so tough. Because it should be as simple as doing what we're doing for a begin shifting. It really should. Because all we're doing for a begin shifting is saying, you know, we're going to look at our global map at wherever we're at, and if it has a weather particle system, go ahead and put it in the scene. So this is in our scene. All of the self is referencing a map row to our current scene. So if we're in here and we do a warp, once we reinitialize the scene, we need to reinitialize the particle system based on the scene we're transitioning into, the new scene that we just initialized here. So instead of this, yeah, I want to say instead of this self, we can just do scene view. It should be as simple as that. Like it should be, because like we would flush it, that gets rid of the particle system. And instead of pulling the old particle system from the weather, we want to pull the particle system from the corresponding string that's in the weather table. So like we go see what's in the weather table, depending on what string's in there. We're going to flush our particle system, which is a little overkill at this point for this part. And then we would insert and emit the appropriate rate of sand. Oh, that's it. That's it. You managed to have the sand inside the room, so set sand to 0 inside. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. When I set sand to 0, the emission rate doesn't set the particles on screen to 0, it sets the new particles emitting to 0. So every particle that would have been existed the instant I transition into the refinery here, those particles would still have to play out their life cycle, even though I set them to 0. Because the only thing I have control of, I mean, there's a bunch of parameters for the particle system in Love2d, but the emission rate, like as far as I know, in order to set them to 0, like you're saying, we would have to release the particle system, but then we'd have to reinitialize all the parameters anyway again. I think this is working though. So like, see how going from a scene like this into the next scene, see how some of them are left over until they die, and that's setting them to 0. So like I didn't want going into the refinery to have that same effect of like the last bit of sand flowing off. But this is looking right. So let me just see if this makes sense. Because what happens here, this line right here, this reinitialization, is what gets rid of the weather as soon as we go into the refinery. But if we were to happen to have put a string of weather in the refinery table, and maybe we can try that, it should register that there is a weather particle system and it was a light sand or something, and then go ahead and reinitialize it. So in our map declarations, we can test this and say, okay, well, there's going to be a heavy sand at 111, which should be our refinery, and see if we still keep... I want to see if we can warp zone into a scene with particle system, because we haven't tested that, and we can. And it does reinitialize, because like it starts, it starts light, and then it becomes filled up. So that is nice. Cool. I think that's what we wanted. I'm like a little hesitant to say we did it. If we look at our git diff here, Instead of inserting the sand system, if there is any weather in the global map table, we're only inserting the sand system if the weather that is initialized in our map table is of the sand variety, so that makes sense. But we also delete the old particle system, which prevents us from getting 4 particle systems in the scene at once, because the way it's working is we're only updating the index 1 of our particle system in our scene and only rendering that particle system as well. So even though we were just table.inserting the new particle systems, we were getting the right look, but underneath the hood we were stacking particle systems. So adding the empty table here fixes that. And then we set the emission rate to 0 only if there is a particle system in action, because we were crashing there. Is that all we did? No. Okay, we can get rid of this local weather. Yeah, we can get rid of that local weather. And we can get rid of those comments too. Okay. It's, I guess I'm not so stoked about it in terms of we have one set of weather initialization for a scene transition and one set for a warp transition. And both of those are happening in the scene, so we can probably pull this out into a method or a function to make that a little cleaner so that we don't have the duplicated code for this, but it seems to be working. I do want to go into our refinery state and take out the render for Flamma for our HUD. We should have it based on the player's equipped status, because right here the A button has nothing equipped. If we equip Flamma there, we see it down at the bottom. See, and then why does that change? Why are we setting this red color back here? Right here, this. There we go. Oh, what the it's a different Flamma. It's a different Flamma. See how they're slightly different? What the we have a Flamma that is like a 12 by 12 and 11 by 11, and the 12 by 12 is the one that's here in the right there. That's the one we're using. The one here is an old, I want to say it's just Flamma 2 we want. We'll probably get rid of that Flamma one, I think. Well, shouldn't have that area on right after you leave the room. Light sand. Shouldn't have that area on right after you leave the room. Light sand, because in previous area is heavy sand. What do you mean shouldn't have the area on? Well, and one thing, like, this isn't where the sand is going. The sand is going over here in the desert. So, like, I'm just trying to get the sand working, period. Then we'll put it in the right spot. Because, like, it's supposed to be over here in the desert. here. Oh my god. Right here. It's supposed to be over here. I just didn't want to walk my tush all the way over there. Uh-oh. We're rendering Flamma regardless in our A slot in a refinery state when we need to render it based on our equipped status. So in our... It's just one of those things. It's like, since... Yeah, it's a byproduct of moving all of the shop logic out of the play state, so it didn't clog that down. We had a whole new state, so we have to duplicate some code like for the HUD because we're updating the scene. So ideally, the HUD should be updated in the scene instead of the state. So maybe that is something we can focus on once we ship the demo, I guess, because that makes a lot more sense. So let's do this where we don't want to render it in the refinery state. Let's see. Okay, well, we're rendering the bar. Okay. So let's just go to our play state and find where we do this. In the play state right here. We want to do this. If the element equipped is Flamma, then we go ahead and equip all the Flamma, render Flamma 2, and render the vibrancy. We probably also want to render the vibrancy in the inventory state as well. So refinery state, we're going to do this. If it's equipped, then let's render vibrancy bar spell slot. Okay, so let's get rid of this. Okay, so we don't have it equipped here. We shouldn't have it equipped in the refinery state. Good. Unless, oh god, unless we actually equip it, then we should be able to carry it into the refinery state. What just happened? Dude. Okay, let's see if we can carry Flamma into the refinery. Okay, yep. Yes, we can. Cool. Sweet. Cool. This is great. This is great. So I guess the next step now that the particle system for weather's working based on the map we're in, we can pop us out of the dungeon in the correct spot now with a particle system of light sand. It's like we're going to come out of the dungeon and it's going to be about right here. So look, if we go, the dungeon's right here. Dungeon entrance is here. The dungeon is 6 scenes, so it's about from here to here to here to here to here to here, and we come out here. Underground, right? Because we're in the dungeon. So if we pop out here, we can extend the dusty desert to start right here as light sand. Because I want to come out on this frame with light sand. So let's try to do that. We have to figure something out. Like I think what I want to do is for the dungeon entrance, I want the right side to be blocked off by a boulder that's in between two posts, so that you can't shoot. It's a little tricky because I want, basically, since you get the green tunic in the dungeon, and the green tunic allows you to push boulders, I want a one-way shortcut available once you make it through the dungeon. So once you make it through the dungeon, that unlocks on this scene here some sort of shortcut you can push. First screen have light, then the second is heavy, and that's okay, but the third area has no storm instead of light. I see what you're saying. Yes, that is, we would do that. We would do that. So that's a good catch. It's just that the sand isn't going to be right here. Like, this was light and heavy. It's really going to be light on this scene when you pop out, and then heavy everywhere else. And that's where, when it's heavy sand, you can't progress to the edge of the screen. And that's just a way of us preventing people in the demo from exploring places we haven't developed yet. Because as you beat each biome, it unlocks a new area. So like as you beat the overworld for the beginning part, it cleanses the water, which is purple. So once you our game here, you get music and you get this loot, and then you play this little mini game. Once you play the right song, it'll trigger the blue water here, the purple to turn into blue water here, and that's a sort of cleansing of the ecosystem. So we'll have a similar thing once you get the tome, the music tome from the forest biome. Then you'll play the lute in the desert, and that'll soothe the sandstorms to unlock the sand biome and boss and stuff. So we have to, for the demo's sake, we need the heavy sand to block the players, because we haven't made the desert levels yet. So that's why we needed only sand for the demo, because the sand is the most restrictive particle system. We have a water rain system here for the forest, but it's not very believable that would stop the player from exploring the screen and stuff. So the sand makes the most sense. So that's why I want the players to come out of the sand. Yeah, you're absolutely right, though. Yeah, we would want it to go from heavy sand to light sand to nothing, and smooth out that transition a bit. I totally agree. Okay, I do want to make sure we get this loot, or this scene transition right, because for the cleansing of the waters, see how we're rendering this water above the mage's castle when it shouldn't be happening there. So let's just fix that, because that just shouldn't be that ugly. And then we need to move. There's one that's wrong. Since we scooted over the rickety bridge, we need to scoot that one over. So let's go find our water transition logic. We have this cleansed water. I want to see it's cleansed water. Cleansed water. Insert cleansed water. Okay, right here. Okay, yes, we're doing this very nasty, but it's okay, because it's like there's only one scene that you can cleanse the water at. Once we trigger that, every water animatable turns into the blue version instead of the purple. So this is saying for the whole top row, as long as it doesn't equal 8, which is wrong, you could let sand for full game. Oh, you know what? I am considering stuff like that. I think for the beginning of the game, I think what we'll do is we'll have a light particle system for every map. So like here, it might be leaves, right? So like we might have like a couple of leaves floating by. And then in the forest, it'll be slightly raining. And then the further you go into the biome, it'll get heavier and heavier until you beat the boss in that biome, and then it kind of stabilizes the environment a little bit. So we might do something like that. Yeah, we might do something like that. And it's a little more apparent when we look at the snow system. Like the snow system is really pretty. It's just like lightly falling snow, and it looks pretty. And same with the lava system, which if we die, I can show you the lava system on the title screen. Let's see here. There's a pit I can fall into. So the little sparks that are floating up, that's like the lava system. So like closer to the volcano area, there's red sparks floating up and there's black soot falling down. So that's another subtle particle system that I do want to linger in the main biome, because it's not super distracting and it's kind of just like atmospheric, like you were saying. So here, it's not if it's not equal to 8. I think it's x is not equal to 8. We want to go insert a thing of a cleansed water. I want to say this is 7. Let's see. Shoot, that's not right. Actually, it was right. It's just that y starting at 2, 8. That's the left side. That's correct. That's correct. Oh. Okay. Okay. So we basically only want it at x being 1, 2, and then 8, 10. 1, 2, 8, and 10. Oh yeah. Oh, we missed out. We missed out on. We could start this at 1. Cool. I'm glad you like them. Yeah, that's. I just don't want them to be distracting, you know? Like, I want to hit that balance of, I want it to feel like there's atmosphere, but I don't want it to be overly distracting. Okay, so there's the cleansed water. It's looking good. This is coming together. Yeah, right now we have 4 particle systems. It's a rain, a snow, a lava, and a sand. We're messing up on the very top right because I think we're doing... Can't tell how we're messing up. It just looks like the very top right is different than all the rest. Okay, that fixed it. I don't know why. I don't know why we're still touching. Okay, so yeah, I fixed the sand issue by... Oh my... I fixed the sand issue by... Basically, we have this thing... So like the when we shift to an adjacent scene, we do this where we're asking in the weather table for the map we're transitioning into if there is a particle system that we need to apply. And if it is light sand or heavy sand, then we go ahead and insert that into the scene's particle system. And basically what we ended up doing to fix our problem was a warp zone is different than a shifting. Shifting is like when it slides. Warp zone is when the curtains close and you appear in a different spot altogether. So we have, in order to fix that, we put in our warp zone logic basically the same thing as our shifting, just that we had to change this, and Magnetronics helped us find this, that it was broken because when we initialize a scene, it nukes our particle system. So basically, we reinitialize the scene once we go from one scene to another, right, for the warp. But then we needed to reinitialize the particle system with the new scene location. So we ask the new scene location, the scene views map row, map column, if there is a particle system in the weather table. If it's a light sand, go ahead, insert that light emission rate sand. If it's a heavy sand, insert that heavy emission rate sand. And then the scene transition, the shifting transition logic would overtake at that point like normal, because it was only broken going from a warp zone back to a scene transition. So we just needed to fix it from a warp zone, and we basically just do the same code just after we reinitialize the scene to fix that. Cool. Now we do need to make the refinery a wood or a stone hut instead of a log cabin. So we still need to do that. I think I might be calling it a night here, just because I'm just a little tired. But yeah, we did good. I would not have figured this out yesterday. It took us almost 2 hours today to do it, but it's huge that we did it. And then we'll build out the outside of the first dungeon to dump us out into the first scene of the desert biome, which will be light sand, and then any adjacent piece is going to be heavy sand from there and stop us from exploring. And then we need to figure out how the puzzle works once you have the green tunic to unlock the shortcut that is in between the dungeon entrance and the dungeon exit right here. We need to figure out how that shortcut's going to work. And I've got some ideas, but I don't exactly know. I'll have to map it out. You know, I'm kind of thinking like the Sokoban style puzzles in Pokemon, where they have like 3 boulders right next to each other, and you have to push the outside ones up so that you can push the first one to the side, and then it unlocks a path. I'm thinking something like that. We have to think of a Sokoban style puzzle that will allow you to unlock the shortcut from the right side only. So if you enter this screen here, it looks like snow, but it is not. You know, snow is just a thing I painted just so I could see what it looks like, but it's gonna be halfway between sand and grass because it bridges the forest and the sand biomes. So instead of the snow being right here, it's gonna be half grass, half snow, half grass, half sand. And then we can start to put that puzzle in so that if you peek from this side, you're stuck because you have to solve the puzzle from outside. So we have to figure out some sort of Sokoban puzzle to make you stuck if you come in it from this side. But if you come out it from this side and you have the green tunic, now that you beat the dungeon, you can push a block, and then unlock this shortcut. And we have this thing, you know, most pushable objects are what I'm calling non-key items, meaning if you push. Actually, we can't push it. Oh gosh, dang it. You can't push a block unless you have the green tunic of strength equipped. So if we go, I can show this, like, Oh my gosh. Let's go. Equip our green tunic. So we put on our green tunic here. Then we push this thing. Then if we come back to that screen, the block is still there. The thing is still there. But if it were a key item, I have a thing called a key item pushable that doesn't reset its position once you go off screen and come back to it. So for the shortcut, we have to also design the puzzle in such a way that you can't push key items in a spot that will completely hinder your game. Because if you accidentally push a key item, the key item will have a persistent space, because that's the whole idea of the shortcut. Is like, I don't necessarily want it, because the green tunic is gonna be right here in the treasure chest that's right here. So, oh gosh. Gosh dang, we have so much stuff to do still. But we put the green tunic in a treasure chest right here, which means I don't want them to go halfway through the dungeon, get the green tunic, come back out, and push the boulder right here from this way. It has to be only from the right side so that it forces them to beat the dungeon. Then once they do, it remains unlocked. So once they've beaten it, they can come back and they don't have to go through the dungeon again to get to the other side. They can always go back in the dungeon to go harvest some more minerals to upgrade their spellcast elements. But I don't want them forced to go through because the shortcut isn't persistent. So like here's in the dungeon where you get the minerals to upgrade your spellcast. I want to see snow system. So like if we put the snow system in here, we can see what the snow system looks like on this scene here. That's not right. That is in the warp zone, right? Yeah, warp zone. So yeah, we want the begin shifting one. Right here, if it is light sand, I'm going to put a snow system instead of sand system just to see it. Oh, gosh. What do you mean, man? Scene 141, emission rate. Oh, okay. Let me just try this. I don't know what the snow emission rate defaults to, but this is why we need to build out, make sure all our particle systems work. See, there's the snow. That's about right for the snow. I just don't like how they all come out all at once and then it stabilizes. I want it to look like this throughout. It's just like that initial emission rate is weird. So like I would like this, maybe a little less snow than this for all the ice mountain stuff, because there's all of this stuff is like the road to the ice mountain. So all of this should have the snow, all of this will have the lava, the rain will have, or the forest will have slight rain. The opening world probably won't have anything, or we do something like leaves if we can get, probably won't be a particle system, it would probably be animated wind gusts or animated leaves, not a particle system. And then the desert has the sand. So yeah, I just don't think we could tweak the particle system to have it readable leaves, because the game is so tiny, it's Game Boy resolution, so the particle systems are 1 pixel each, the literal particles of our particle system is a 1 by 1 pixel. So we can't have much readability for something like a leaf floating in the wind with the current particle system. Okay, we made good progress. We've got the weather particle system down for both a scene transition and a warp. So now we need to add the exit to the dungeon. We need to figure out the puzzle for the shortcut. We need to put the loot in the treasure chest at the end of the dungeon. We need to put the tunic at the beginning of the dungeon in the treasure chest. And then we need to build out the map overworld, which includes remodeling Ren's refinery to be stone on the outside. And we also need to build out a believable sand scene that makes it so that they can't explore past a certain, they can't go more than 2 scenes into the desert without it being a total block. So we can maybe put some geckos down in there as enemies in the sand for the demo at least, and then also just purely block them out if they go anywhere on these 6 or 5 scenes. Then we have to plan the overworld for about this, and this, and then as well as maybe this whole top 2 row. So if we design a little overworld, because we won't have access to the forest biome, so we need to build a little pathway with corrupted water that's blocking the bridge. And once in the demo you cleanse the water, that is supposed to unlock the bridge to let you explore the forest biome. But for the demo, we don't have the forest biome developed, so for the demo it won't clear it. But in the game, clearing the purple will unlock the forest biome for you to explore. And then the forest will unlock the desert will unlock the mountain, and then the mountain will unlock the volcano. And then we kind of go about that way. It actually, we might have to think about it differently too, because we've got the spellcast elements. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to worry about that just yet, because we just need to finish the demo. So let's work on, we'll work on what I covered just there, but we're making good progress. I want to say that this is working weather particle systems for map-based declarations, which is sweet. And then we will raid out here to somebody. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll get some more good work done. Finn is on. We might raid Finn. Let's see what Finn's working on. Yeah, we'll raid Finn. Finn's a good friend of the channel. Indie game dev on the same team. So let's go raid out. Have fun. Have a good night, y'all. Thanks for hanging out. We'll be back tomorrow. Back at it. Thanks for watching.
We looked at other cats.